welcome to Wavescan, the international DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis, and produced in the studios of shortwave station WRMI in Miami. I'm Jeff White. Today on Wavescan, one shortwave station in the U.S. goes off the air, and another goes back on. We'll have our Ancient DX report for 1904, and our monthly DX report from Japan. Last week on Wavescan, we presented the first part of a series of reports about the history of WYFR, the large shortwave station in Okeechobee, Florida. And last Sunday, June 30th, WYFR made its final broadcast. This also spelled the end of the daily relay broadcasts of Radio Taiwan International to the Americas, using the facilities of WYFR. Here's a recording of one of the last transmissions of Radio Taiwan International in Spanish via WYFR.
Damas y caballeros, así concluye la transmisión en la lengua española para el día de hoy en Radio Taiwán Internacional. Esta es WYFR Okeechobee, Florida.
WYFR is now part of shortwave history. In the coming weeks here on Wavescan, we'll continue with Adrian Peterson's series about the history of WYFR and its predecessors. And just one day before WYFR signed off for the last time, station KVOH in California signed back on the shortwave bands after being off the air for a couple of years. A bilingual test transmission in English and Spanish took place June 29th from 1900 to 2100 UTC on one of KVOH's traditional frequencies, 17775 kHz, with 50 kilowatts beamed to Cuba, Mexico, Central America, and the Caribbean.
This is a test broadcast of KVOH Los Angeles, the voice of hope. KVOH Los Angeles is licensed by the Federal Communications Commission in Washington, D.C., to broadcast on frequencies 17.775 megahertz in the 16-meter band and 9.975 megahertz in the 31-meter band. This is a test broadcast.
When you care enough to listen to the very best, we're the voice of hope. KVOH, Los Angeles, California.
One of the announcements aired during the KVOH test transmission on June 29th. Back in mid-May, John Taylor, president of Strategic Communications Group, which now manages KVOH, still under the license of La Voz de Restauración, spoke at the annual meeting of the National Association of Shortwave Broadcasters.
We've just come back as a part of the Voice of Hope out of Los Angeles. And in order to talk about that station in Los Angeles, I have to go back to 1979, when my father-in-law, Dr. George Otis, founded the first Voice of Hope station in South Lebanon in the middle of a war in northern Israel. And he did that because his friend Menachem Begin and he were having lunch, and he said, "You know, George, I know you love the Jews, but what about the Christians who are suffering as they're being killed in South Lebanon?" And he said, I don't know anything about that. So Begin flew him up to Lebanon on his helicopter to meet with a man by the name of Major Saad Haddad, who is the leader of Free Lebanon. He was the leader of the Christians. He never took a rank higher than major because he said he never earned it, even though for all intents and purposes he was their general. And Haddad said, he said, if I had a way to encourage our people here in South Lebanon, if I had a way to encourage the Christians and to give them hope, if I had a radio station, it would really help me. And George smiled and said, well, what if we could build you a radio station where you could give your people hope and let them know that they're winning the war and humanitarian and all that? He goes, yeah, that would really, really help. Would you do that for me? He says, I think the Christians of North America would build you that radio station. He goes, well, then I'd welcome it. We could do this right away. He said, Major, if we build you a radio station, don't you think God should have a radio station too? And he said, if you build me my radio station, you can build you your radio station. So within 6 months, we had two 50,000-watt AM radio stations on the air. One was Voice of the South for Christian Free Lebanon, and the other was Voice of Hope, which was a gospel radio station. And those were the early years of that kind of broadcasting in that region. And we went on to expand with a King of Hope shortwave out of South Lebanon. And we also built a television station there called Star of Hope, which we gave to Pat Robertson, and that became the genesis for Middle East television. It was in the 80s that George had a desire to reach Latin America with the gospel. We lived in Los Angeles at the time, and he felt that the station should be there, and felt that God told him this is where the station is to be, and it's to be a harvesting machine for the Lord. It's to tell people about the gospel of Jesus Christ and to encourage them in their faith. And in 1983, we purchased a transmitter from our friends at HCJB in Quito, Ecuador. It was a transmitter that had already been on the air about 20 years at that point. It was an RCA Ampliphase transmitter, and they gave us a good price for it, and we moved it to Los Angeles. And in 1987, KVOH, the Voice of Hope for the Americas, went on the air. And we ran that station until 2002. I'd left in 1998, but in 2002 that station was sold to a local pastor after my father-in-law got ill. The board sold it to a local pastor who ran it till just last year, and came looking for us to see if we would be interested in continuing the gospel programming, that they couldn't do it any longer for their own economical reasons. But they asked if we could do it, and if we would, they'd give us the station. I was very reluctant at this opportunity, and in '98 I had left High Adventure to start a group called Strategic Communications Group, and we were focusing at the time on low power FM, but in the missionary context and working with the underground church leaders in the Middle East and North Africa. And we've placed over 70 of these small Pure Word FM radio stations that just broadcast the Pure Word in dramatized Arabic and some other languages, Farsi and so forth. And so I was doing this at the time, and we still are. So when this opportunity came, I thought, man, I haven't thought of shortwave for a few years, and what's the condition of it, and where are we today in shortwave, and so forth. So I had to really arm myself with some articles and why, and making that case for why shortwave was very refreshing to read that, and so I accepted it, and we went and looked at the transmitter site. The transmitter was off the air. It had an issue with some broadcasts on some aviation frequencies, and the FCC was not happy about. So we had to clean up all of that and some licensing issues, and so we're looking to have KVOH back on the air within the next 90 days using the RCA transmitter. We'd like to get 4 to 8 hours a day of broadcasting out of that, and but we think it would be wise to start looking for a replacement transmitter for the next year and see if we can't cut some of those operational costs by putting some more equipment in there. After KVOH was built, when I was with High Adventure Broadcasting, we leased. We wanted to put up a network of stations in Asia, and we identified Guam as the place to do it. TWR was already there. The Adventist had just signed on their station at the time, and was having great success. And we thought, well, maybe Guam is for us too. And so we went out, and the licensing process was long and tedious, and we weren't sure that Guam would accommodate us. But we leased some airtime with Adventist World Radio. We leased about 4 to 6 hours a day, and they were very generous to us, allowing us to broadcast into Asia and just try it out and see if this was a good audience for us. And we wound up building a station just south of there on the island of Palau. This is one of the locations where Tokyo Rose broadcast out of in World War II, and it's a beautiful island. And so we built a station there. KHBN. LeSea Broadcasting just purchased that last year, and they shut down their operation in Honolulu, in Hawaii rather, and moved their transmitters out to Palau. So they've got a nice operation going there and broadcasting the gospel from that site. And I'm glad it's still a voice for the kingdom of God. Our plans for KVOH, we would like to broadcast in both Spanish and English. When I left High Venture back in 97, 98, we were doing about two-thirds Spanish and one-third English. And that seemed like a really great combination of language. We produced a lot of that programming ourselves. We had paid broadcasts in Spanish. The antennas, TCI log periodic, we're at about 2,400 feet up on top of Chatsworth Peak in the well, I guess it'd be the northwest corner of Los Angeles, right on the border of Ventura County, right near Simi Valley. And so it's a great location. We have about 60, 70 acres on the top of that mountain. Most of the antenna takes up a good part of that. So we're really excited about the future and about getting the station back on the air, learning more about DRM. This is something we want to know more about and what the plans are and what the next steps are for that. But it's good to be back among friends, and many of us have the same goals and objectives and mission, and I want to encourage you in that. This is good ground. This is a good bang for your buck, as my father-in-law used to say. Shortwave is listened to around the world.
That was John Taylor, president of Strategic Communications Group, which is managing the newly returned shortwave station KVOH in Los Angeles, California. Ray Robinson, the station's operations manager, tells us that tests will continue on 17,775 kilohertz and in the coming weeks also on 9,975 kilohertz. Besides the primary target areas, it should also be audible in much of the United States, especially east of the Rocky Mountains, and maybe even in parts of Western Europe as well. A special QSL card is available for reception reports on these test transmissions that are sent to the postal or email addresses given on the air.
Norteamérica, Centroamérica, Suramérica, España y las islas del Caribe. Aquí nos unimos todos. KVOH, Los Ángeles.
A KVOH announcement in Spanish there. Stay tuned to 17,775 and 9,975 kilohertz in the coming weeks for more broadcasts from Los Angeles. Well, the year 1904 saw several remarkable wireless developments in many different countries of Europe and North America, as well as over in the Far East, including the transmission of Morse messages from an international war zone. Deliberation was also given regarding a new distress signal in Morse code. Those are the topics of our Ancient DX report today for 1904. At the beginning of the year 1904, on January 7th actually, the Marconi Company in England recommended the usage of CQD as the international distress signal in Morse code. And this three-letter sequence was officially implemented by the Marconi Company 3 weeks later on February 1st. During this same year, the Marconi Company also secured a government contract to install a wireless station on the island of Guernsey in the English Channel, just 30 miles off the nearby coast of France. France itself established a wireless station under the call sign FF on its own island, Ussant, out in the Atlantic off the westernmost point of continental France. Over in Denmark, Valdemar Poulsen developed a voice transmission system on longwave 100 kilohertz, known as the Singing Arc. And in Austria, Professor Otto Nussbaumer yodeled an Austrian folk song into a transmitter that was tuned to 18 meters, and the signal was picked up by a receiver 75 feet away. This spontaneous musical event in 1904 is claimed in Austria to be the world's first broadcast of music. Across the Atlantic in Canada, Marconi increased the height of the antenna system at his Tablehead wireless station, later call sign VAS, by an additional 15 feet, and he doubled the transmitter power from 75 kilowatts to 150 kilowatts. The famous Marconi wireless station CE at Cape Race in Newfoundland was opened on November 17th, this year, 1904. Meanwhile, way up north, the Army ran a telephone line all the way from Seattle, Washington, to Sitka in Alaska, a distance of nearly 2,000 miles, with an underwater cable across Norton Sound. However, moving ice caused breakages in the underwater cable, so a wireless telegraph link was spliced into this communication system, with transmitters at 3 kilowatts and receivers installed at Fort St. Michael, callsign FM, and Safety Harbor, callsign FD, covering an intervening distance of 100 miles. A recent migrant from Luxembourg, Hugo Gernsback, established his electro-importing company in New York City. And Reginald Fessenden transferred his wireless equipment from Old Point, Comfort, Virginia, to Brant Rock, Massachusetts, under the callsign BO. In addition, the Navy tested wireless sets from 4 different manufacturers between 2 locations, Annapolis, Maryland, and Washington, D.C. The Navy also installed a wireless station at the Highland Lighthouse for ship-to-shore communication. Multitudes of picture postcards in various styles have since been printed showing this famous wireless station. The commercial wireless station SC at Siasconset on the eastern end of Nantucket Island, Massachusetts, underwent an increased workload, and it was moved into a larger building just across the street. The 1904 World's Fair was staged at St. Louis, Missouri, from April 30th to December 1st. The location, covering 2 square miles, contained 75 miles of roadways and 1,500 buildings, with displays from 63 different countries. Nearly 1 million people visited this huge international exposition. The popular song Meet Me in St. Louis, Louis, was composed specifically for this 1904 World's Fair in St. Louis by Andrew Sterling and Carrie Mills. And the popular saying, "An apple a day keeps the doctor away," was introduced by Professor J.T. Stinson in one of his health lectures. Wireless development was featured at this World's Fair, and Lee DeForest obtained a tall tower from Niagara Falls in Canada and erected it in the center of the fairgrounds for the main antenna system. A promotional advertising pin declared this tower to be the world's tallest wireless tower. A total of 10 subsidiary wireless stations were installed at various points around the fairgrounds, and a continuous stream of Morse messages from the tall tower was picked up at each station, thus demonstrating the instant communication capability of wireless to the multitudes of fair attendees. Over in California, the young experimenter Francis McCarty achieved voice transmissions over water at a distance of 7 miles with the use of a spark-activated telephone. The U.S. Navy inaugurated regular weather broadcasts in Morse code from their wireless stations, TG at Mare Island and TI at Yerba Buena in California. During the summer of 1904, DeForest installed a commercial wireless station in the Palace Hotel on Market Street in San Francisco, under the self-allocated and rather obvious callsign PH. This station was built by Sidney Adams, who gained fame when he morsed the letter S across the Atlantic 2 years earlier, the first transatlantic communication by wireless. In the maritime scene, several ships featured prominently in wireless events. Test transmissions with the passenger liner Campania demonstrated that the increased antenna height and the 100% increase in power at the Marconi station at Tablehead in Canada gave a 200-mile increase in coverage into the Atlantic. However, a 9-month-long series of test transmissions between the Campania and another liner, the Lacania, were considered to be unsuccessful. Marconi equipment was installed into 3 Navy vessels, New York, Massachusetts, and Porter, and Fessenden equipment was installed into 3 other Navy vessels, Alabama, Illinois, and Dolphin. It was on February 8, 1904, that hostilities broke out in the Far East between Japan and Russia, a war that lasted a total of nearly 19 months and ended on September 5th of the following year, 1905. The London Times and the New York Times signed a contract with the Lee DeForest Company on January 1, 1904, for 2 wireless stations to be installed in the theater of war for the purpose of sending news reports back to England and the United States. That story we plan to present in full detail on another occasion.
You're listening to Wavescan from Adventist World Radio. Send your comments and reception reports to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the United States. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229 in the USA. Or you can email us at wavescan@awr.org. Our email once again, wavescan@awr.org.
Hello and welcome to the DX Report of the Month from Japan Shortwave Club, edited by Toshi Otake, and I'm Yuki Kotsuji. We have many DX reports from our club members this week. The first test transmission of PCJ Radio International, Taiwan, from Trincomalee, Sri Lanka, was heard on 11750 kHz on May 19th, from 1300 to 1400 UTC in English. SIO rating was 554. Focus Asia Pacific and Happy Station Show were aired. They also broadcast on 11835 kHz on June 2nd and 9th from 1300 to 1400 in English. SIO rating for this transmission was 554. The Happy Station Show program included interviews with Mr. Victor Gunetelike, mentioning what kind of information is needed for a good reception report, and with Mr. Victor Chan of China Business News Radio. Bible Voice broadcasting via Trincomalee, Sri Lanka was received on 21480 kHz on June 9th, from the sign-on at 11:15 to 11:45 UTC. SIO rating was 353. Eternal Good News in English was on the air until 11:30, then Lamp of Hope in Japanese was broadcast. Radio New Zealand International was heard on 9700 kHz on June 2nd, from 0945 to the sign-off at 0957 UTC in English. SIO rating was 454. The programs aired were news and American oldies music. Galei Zahar from Israel was heard on 15850 kHz on June 7th, from 2100 to 2200 UTC in Hebrew. SIO rating was 353. Talk program and pop music were aired. Voice of Greece was received on 9420 kHz on June 2nd, from 2030 to 2103 UTC in Greek. SIO rating was 343. Local songs were played. ID was given at 2100, then news started. The parallel frequency 15630 kHz was heard with SIO rating 252. Mashal Radio USA via Wörterhotel, Germany was heard on 15360 kHz on June 9th, from 0845 to 0900 UTC in Pashto. SIO rating was 352. Talk program and local music were broadcast. Radio Levy from Libya was heard on 11600 kHz on June 3rd, from 2015 to the sign-off at 2019 UTC in Arabic. SIO rating was 353. Local music was aired. World Harvest Radio from Cypress Creek, USA was received on 11565 kHz on June 2nd, from 0904 to 0911 UTC in English. SIO rating was 352. Hymns and preachers were on the air. Radio Nacional da Amazônia from Brasília, Brazil was heard on 11780 kHz on June 2nd, from 0900 to 0903 UTC in Portuguese. SIO rating was 453. They aired a talk program. LRA 36 Radio Nacional Arcángel San Gabriel, Antarctica was heard on 15476 kHz on May 30th from 1900 to 1916 UTC in Spanish. SIO rating was 141, then up to 242. Latin music and a talk program by a female announcer were aired. Finally, Japan Shortwave Club will issue the QSL cards for the correct reports on a segment of Wavescan program. We are issuing QSL card by email to the report sent by email. Our address for your email report is jswcqsl@live.jp. I repeat, jswcqsl@live.jp. We continue to issue the printed QSL card by the same system as before. Your report should be addressed to JSWC PO Box 44, Kamakura, which is KAMAKURA, postal code 248-8691, Japan. $1 ILC or $2 for return postage will be appreciated. For this edition of DX Report, we would like to thank Mr. Iwao Nagatani, Mr. Tetsuya Ogawa, Mr. Hirokazu Mitsumoto, Mr. Mitsunori Kawazoe, Mr. Mikoto Kidera, Mr. Hiroyuki Akiba, and Mr. Satoshi Miyashita for sharing the information with us. Thank you for listening, and please join us for our next edition of DX Report of Japan Shortwave Club. I'm Yukiko Tsuji in Tokyo.
Thanks, Yukiko. And very quickly, a reminder of our annual Wavescan contest, which runs during this month of July. You need to do 5 things. A, list your 5 best QSLs from Africa and state briefly why they're your 5 best. B, photocopy your 5 best QSLs from Africa. C, list your 5 most wanted QSLs from Africa. D, 3 reception reports of AWR relay stations in Africa or AWR relay stations broadcasting to Africa. And E, send 3 radio-related postcards. The address we'll give you in just a moment. Music from the Czech Republic ends Wavescan today. The Maize is Ripe is the name of this song. Thanks for listening to Wavescan, the International DX program from Adventist World Radio. Researched and written by Dr. Adrian Peterson in Indianapolis. Next week, a tribute to Family Radio Shortwave, Part 2, The Early Years in New Jersey, and our Philippine DX report. We have 2 QSL cards available, one from AWR, another from WRMI. You can send your reports as well as your entries for the annual DX contest to Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. That's Wavescan, Box 29235, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46229, USA. Our email is wavescan@awr.org. That's wavescan@awr.org. I'm Jeff White at WRMI in Miami. Till next week, good listening, everyone.